Hi, I'm Micah, and I'm privileged. Every day I was privileged, and I took that for granted. I was comfortable, I woke up, I ate breakfast because we always had food. I walked, I biked, I drove to and from school. I played and I ran around with my friends. I came home to a family and a bed to sleep on. I never had a reason to be afraid or feel threatened. I was safe, and every day I took that for granted. Every day the people around me, white, black, brown, Asian, everyone took that for granted. We were fortunate. We were comfortable. We were surrounded by affluence and security, but we were sheltered. Why? Were we lucky? Were we blessed? Yes, but we became numb to the reality of racism in greater America. I'm brown, Filipino, Asian. I'm a person of color, but the experience of people of color cannot be grouped with the experiences of oppressed people of color all around this country. I've never experienced racism. Therefore, I cannot relate to the oppression of Black people. That would do their suffering injustice. People of color like myself cannot relate to the injustices of Black people when they come from a background of privilege. That would do their suffering injustice. Racism has always existed. Racism towards people of color has always existed. But racism towards Black men, women, and children in America has been and is existent. In fact, racism has only been translated over the course of history. Racism never ended with slavery. Racism never ended with Jim Crow. Civil rights never solved racism. Today, racism is systematic. Racism is present in politics, business, education, the media, everywhere. But society has become numb. Society has become deaf. Society has become blind to racism until someone's life is stolen, until someone is murdered, until someone like George Floyd is dead, until George Floyd's family and community are mourning his death. George Floyd was 46 years old. That's younger than both of my parents. That's too young to die. That's too young to die without a cause. And for what? A counterfeit $20 bill? Or whatever the amount was? Does society think that murder is an acceptable punishment for $20? That is injustice. That is systematic. And that is systematic racism because George Floyd is not alone. What about Breonna or Ahmaud? Or others? But why does systematic racism exist? Society has failed. Society has failed to educate. Parents have failed to educate. Children have failed to become educated themselves. Schools have failed to educate. Churches and faith groups have failed to educate. Higher education fails to educate. Business fails to educate. Politics fails to educate. Therefore, society fails to educate. Both the Jewish and Christian traditions share this principle, the greatest commandment, that is, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and to love your neighbor as yourself. What if all of society, every community, and each individual followed the second greatest commandment, to love your neighbor as yourself? The world would be a much better place, a more humane world, a more just world, a more loving world. If love is proactive, racism can be systematically prevented before someone's life is unjustly taken. If love is practiced in every moment of the day, then maybe, just maybe, there will be more good news instead of bad news. If love is reactive, those oppressed can become the big people because love conquers all. Love breaks barriers and unites divisions. Love isn't theoretical. It isn't a feeling, but rather, love is the only weapon that can defeat hate. Hate only produces more hate and divisions. Hate is anti-community and anti-justice. Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. If you hate your enemies and wish for the worst, you are no better than them. But one thing that love isn't complacent. The first commandment is to love God. But how can you love God if you cannot love others, and vice versa? But what does God require? That we do justice, that we love kindness, and that we walk humbly. Whether you're protesting, advocating, or educating, do this. Protest for justice, advocate with kindness, and educate with humility. Together, the oppressive America can have their voices heard. Together, our walls of injustice and police brutality can be shaken. And together, there is hope for a future of racial equality instead of inequality, racial security instead of insecurity, racial unity instead of disunity, and racial peace instead of war. Love never fails. During these times of racial civil inequality and civil racism, don't forget that racism exists elsewhere. Racism exists in the economy, and economic racism further oppresses the Black community. Support local businesses that support the Black community. Together, we can make an effort to help the Black community out of economic inequality. Together, the barrier of inequality can crumble along with the barrier of racism. This is love. I've been recently introduced to Maggie Anderson's Our Black Year. I haven't read the book yet, but I've checked out a TED Talk from the author. The author talks about how your business as a consumer can impact the social justice of the Black community. But before we can start supporting change, or even making change, we as individuals, as communities, as society, and as a country need to realize that something is very wrong in the United States of America. Something is very wrong, and it is called racism. Racism is real, call it out. But before you judge others, judge yourself. Don't be hypocritical. Don't be complacent either. For many of you, you are privileged. I am privileged. Don't ever take that for granted. Privilege is a luxury.